We've raised the legal age to purchase firearms of ammunition in Rhode Island. We've banned large capacity magazines. We've stopped straw men from buying guns from someone else who is illegally prohibited from having one.
If you really understand the community like I do, the mistrust was there. And this should bring some of that trust back because it's open, it's clear. I've been in law enforcement for 30 years, and I can tell you, I've never seen anything like it, but I was so happy to be part of it to effectively make the changes that needed to be changed.
Holding the powerful accountable from Washington, D.C. to right here in southern New England. This is 10 News Conference with Gene Valicenti.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Gene Valicenti. Safe storage of firearms and police reform. Just a few topics for our mid-year reporter roundtable right here on NBC 10. Good morning. Once again, joining me in studio is Alison, Bologna, Brian Crandall, and Tamara Sacharczyk. All right, let's dig right into it. This is after budget week. The budget passed, $14 billion. I want to begin with housing, because this is really the year of housing, affordable housing, low-income housing, ADUs, in-law little buildings in the back. That all passed. That's what Speaker Sacharczyk wanted. However, he told me it hasn't made him very popular. Let's listen to the Speaker, then we'll pick it up. Speaker Sacharczyk.
I think that there's a need. There's a great need. And a lot of things in life we want, we can't get. And there's a lot of things we don't want, we get. But I will tell you that it's not that I woke up one morning and I said, well, I want to push all these things on municipalities. As a matter of fact, to be quite honest, it has not exactly been a boon to my personal practice. A lot of communities, I'm not exactly welcome to practice law there anymore. But that comes with the job. And I understand that. And I accepted that when I became Speaker. There's a need for housing. I will tell you that this need is not unique to Rhode Island, and it's a crisis situation.
Did you hear what he said there? It hasn't made him very popular. His phone's not ringing. He does zoning and property law in all the cities and towns, and he said, since I pushed these ADUs and low-income housing and things like that on all the towns, my phone's not ringing. What do you make of that?
Well, I did a story a couple months ago with the Speaker and some folks in Narragansett. And they're one of the towns. He targeted Narragansett and said they're pushing back. They don't want this in their backyard, called it NIMBYism. And they said, no, these laws that the state is pushing to increase housing or affordable housing are not going to work because we don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the sewer. We don't have the water to do what he wants to do. He'll claim, well, they just don't want the kind of housing that he wants.
Well, listen, there are some affluent communities don't want low-income housing because they say it brings a whole host of attendant social problems with it. Alison, is that a fair complaint?
I don't think so. I think a lot of people get confused between the difference between public housing, voucher-based housing, and affordable housing, which is essentially income-controlled housing, 30-year deed restrictions for developers, and low-income housing right now, if you want to call it affordable housing, we're talking about people who are still paying more than $1,000 a month in rent. So it's not like it's voucher Section 8, and there needs to be sort of step-ups. And that's what Rhode Island Housing's doing right now, is they're doing affordable housing at different AMIs, 60%, 80%, even 120%, which, by the way, 2 bedrooms now and middle income are going for like $1,800 a month in Rhode Island. So these are folks with jobs who are moving into affordable housing units.
And that's what the advocates who are pushing on the Speaker's side, pushing for looser restrictions for more housing, will say, these are people who work for municipalities. These are firefighters, police officers, teachers. They need a place to live and they're getting priced out.
And let me tell you, a lot of this is happening regardless too, because I'm working on a story about illegal apartments in Providence. So, people creating apartments in their garages and their basements in unsafe spots. It's happening all over the place. We found hundreds when we went through inspection reports. So people are going to do it regardless. Might as well make it legal and safe.
Well, but I think there is the other side of the argument. Listen, you have these towns, people say, I worked hard, this is the house, this is the way I want it. And if you're going to bring other people in here, it'll be added to the schools. All the social services will be taxed.
There are towns and cities too. Fair. There's a side to every argument, but there's also mandates in certain towns. I can tell you in Pawtucket, they wanted a 10% mandate on affordable housing, and it didn't pass at first. And you would think in Pawtucket it would, but it didn't. So not everybody's for it, and they're not voting for these mandates.
Well, it's 10% on every city and town.
And most of them are nowhere near that.
They're nowhere near that.
Yeah, most of them are well below that.
Right.
And we'll see what happens with the bond, right? There's a $120 million bond that was part of this package this year, and the voters will have a say.
All right, $14 billion budget. We still don't know what the bridge is going to cost us to repair, but the governor said it doesn't sound like it's going to be a 2-year build. I mean, this is 2024 already. They were talking 2026. It's demo and rebuild. This is the governor conceding, I think, that it could be more than 2 years.
When we get the time frame in with the responses on the RFPs for the building the new bridge that outlast all our lifetimes, Gene, we may have to reset the time frame, but that right now we're being as aggressive as we can in the ask to push the contractors to provide us with the most timely and efficient strategy. We're going to listen to the people that we feel as though that are the most qualified and that can do the construction is on a time frame that is quick as possible.
So if it's more than 2 years, it could be 3, it could be 4. 2 is very ambitious.
They're going to be scrutinizing every step.
Well, and I think right off the bat, when they came out with that timetable, even as non-engineers or construction people, you look at that and say, that seems very fast to build a bridge that size. The DOT will say, now we do design build, you can do all this at the same time. And remember, there are those big bonuses in there to get it done before then. And again, I did a story not that long ago about how this would line up with the election for governor in 2026 and how much of Dan McKee's prospects are riding on this.
Well, a lot, I think. A lot, depending on how aggressive his opposition is going to be and dragging up these pictures that we see every night.
And we don't know who's going to be governor when this is done.
No, Helena Folks is measuring the drapes, though. We know that. And by the way, interesting, Attorney General Noronha, who was talking about running for governor himself, is now talking about lieutenant governor teaming up with Helena Folks. Isn't that an odd combination to take on Governor McKee? Let's talk about education, because that was a big part of the budget, Tammy. Education in Providence. The governor is not anxious to give the schools back, and the mayor is not anxious to take them back.
I would not be surprised if this ended with an entirely new turnaround plan, to be honest. If they just reformed how they were doing everything and introduced a new plan and said, well, reassess again 5 years down the road, because like you said, I don't think either of them are eager to make any big, real changes here.
No, the COVID hit and the pandemic hit, and that slowed things down. It came at a bad time. As soon as they were taken over, we hit COVID. The governor says attendance is better in Providence. That's his big thing.
That's his push.
And he also hinted just yesterday that test scores could be up in Providence. We'll see.
By a little bit.
A little bit.
And I think a lot of people were kind of surprised that the commissioner stuck around after Raimondo left. So that's kind of interesting as well, too.
Yeah.
She hasn't gone anywhere, and she seems to be really digging in with this attendance matters push. They keep going back to attendance being the real problem. We'll see.
Staffing, too.
Yeah.
Also, speaking of the commissioner, she sent a letter to the mayor saying you're screwing up the funding for building new schools. There's millions of dollars in question here that haven't been accounted for. There's quite a letter that was
sent. The superintendent of schools is really upset as well. He went publicly saying we're not getting enough money from the mayor and we need more now. So we'll see.
He recorded a video.
He did, and it went on the air
he
for a very long time. It's a long video, Dr. Montañez. And he was an interesting guy. He was homeless. He came up through the system, and now he's a superintendent of schools, and he wants to see some change. And he seems pretty angry, actually. So.
All right. Well, listen, the hospital is not that far from the education headquarters in Providence, just a couple of blocks away. The hospital this week is making big news. Brown University is not merging with Lifespan, but it sounds like they're buying in.
They're branding.
Right.
So what do you think's going on there?
Well, yeah, I mean, in terms of the healthcare industry, it's for the last few years, it's like, what's going to happen? Lifespan tried to merge with Care New England, and the Attorney General nixed that. And now, you've got the Roger Williams Fatima deal and all this stuff going on. Listen, I think it's a tough time from what you hear to run a hospital, and Brown has money, and they have a name.
And they have a medical school.
And they have a medical school, so they're branding the hospital, they're putting their name on it, and hopefully that brings the cachet, it seems to me, because you're right, it's not a merger, it's not a takeover.
It's a rebrand.
Yeah, and maybe infusing some cash into the system.
Well, I think hospitals were also really affected by the pandemic. You know what I mean? They lost a ton of money when they had to pause their elective surgeries and whatnot. That's where they make most of their money. So, when you think about the impact years down the road, doing something like this could help save them financially.
Well, Brown needs a hospital to instruct its medical students. And it wants more of a say in what's going on in those hospitals, so it's willing to pay for that. And you're right, it gets to put its logo on the building. That's going to be a big logo, right? And the hospital needs cash. So it sounds like a win-win. The Attorney General seems okay.
Right, yeah.
Right, and they say they're not going to eliminate staff, which, you wonder with a merger if there's going to be a downsizing, but they claimed when they made the announcement this week that wasn't going to happen. So, it will be interesting if this is the lifeline that they were looking for.
All right, when we come back, let's talk about reforming the police officers' Bill of Rights, reforming the pension changes, and then each reporter has a specialty they want to talk about. Stay with us on 10 News Conference.
Thank you for turning to 10, your news leader. 10 News Conference with Gene Valicenti continues right now.
Welcome back to our Reporters Roundtable. In the middle of the year, let's assess. Tammy, we finally got police officers' Bill of Rights, some reform. Not everybody's happy, but there's something there. That's compromise.
Yeah, I mean, it is compromise. I did happen to talk to a police officer yesterday who was very unhappy with it, and is also running for office. So, I mean, we'll see what happens in the coming years with it, but a lot of advocates did say that changes did need to be made. So
this particular officer you spoke with, he liked it the way it was?
Yeah.
Protections for police officers.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
that's what it sounded like.
Right, and again, part of the changes that are in this bill are the makeup of the panel that will decide what happens to an officer. Right now, it's 3 people are chosen on a leaderboard board. They're the ones who hear the case.
Yeah.
They're the
peer
judge
to peer.
and jury, and it's like the officer gets to pick one, the city or police department that's trying to discipline them gets to pick one, and then they pick one in the middle. Now it's going to go to 5, and it's supposed to be at random. Right, and then now the police chiefs can say more, and that's a big part of it too. Is they can never
and the
tell
mayors.
us like when somebody's in trouble. And now, although I would kind of debate that a little bit, they probably could have said more.
We've all done stories where they use that as, I'm sorry, I can't speak about what that officer is alleged to have done.
Yeah, but then some other departments will tell you.
Yeah.
So, it's like you get one thing sometimes and another thing some other times, and this ups how much. And I think the police chiefs are happy because now they can hand out more discipline, up to 14 days instead of 2 days without a hearing. Yeah. But as you said, not everybody's happy. You have the progressives and Black Lives Matter Rhode Island PAC who are saying, no, we wanted what they called a George Floyd litmus test. Like if an officer kills somebody, like can they fire him right away? And they're like, no, this bill doesn't address that because they still have to wait for the criminal proceedings to play out.
It's a step, though, after years and years of them talking about this reform. Nobody thought it would ever happen. It's like the car tax is suddenly gone after years and years. So here we are. It's compromise. Yeah, I would agree with that.
That's been a source of debate for 30-odd years.
Right.
Much of this is unique to Rhode Island. Other states don't afford these protections.
Right, and especially since George Floyd and the protests, 4 summers ago, it's really ramped up in terms of, this is not providing transparency and what the public
And do you think the Dolan case had a lot to do with it, too?
I think that pushed it as well. The Pawtucket
mayor
police
came
officer,
right
Daniel
out.
Dolan.
He's like, my hands are tied.
And they wanted to. The city wanted to get rid of him.
Twice.
Another perennial issue that's been debated for more than 30 years, the state of DCYF. The perennially troubled Child Welfare Agency. There's new leadership there. And I guess new hope that it will go in the right direction, although it was just in the news a couple of weeks ago for the wrong reasons. So that continues.
That's not unique to Rhode Island, that's for sure.
That leads us to DHS. You've been following the Department of Human Services, which is, I still believe, the biggest department in state government.
It's big.
Yeah.
It's a big chunk.
It's a big
it serves
umbrella.
more than 350,000 Rhode Islanders. And we're talking about the most vulnerable Rhode Islanders, those on Medicaid, SNAP benefits. So I got a lot of questions in to ask Alison about why are the wait times so long? I need help. I can't get through. We were getting told 5-6 hours for some people on the phone. So I collaborated all that. The director came in and she was very frank and she said, we need to do better. And I said, well, how are you going to do that? What's the action plan? And she said, I need at least 10 more people. And I just found out the positions have been secured in the last budget. So they are hiring 10 more full-time employees to be able to be on the front ends to help with customer service. Now, Jim, the spokesperson from DHS, says it's not going to solve every problem, but it's a step in the right direction. Yep. So they are getting more funding, more people, and they do realize it's a problem, and they want to do better.
All right, Department of Human Services. Brian, you want to talk about guns. We just passed more gun measures.
Right, so the safe storage bill, the governor just signed it, right, and advocates for more tightened gun laws will applaud that, and they certainly did. And again, you have to keep a gun safely stored in a house, and advocates said it was too easy for people to either get a weapon to do harm to themselves or someone else. But, I'd also point out the governor said in his State of the State address back in January that, again, let's try to pass an assault weapons ban. And that really didn't seem to get any traction this year. Like, not much at all. So over the past couple of years, it's chipping away at certain things, the larger capacity magazines. But the assault weapons ban has been brought up a number of years in a row by the governor, and then it just doesn't seem to go anywhere. There doesn't seem to be the appetite for it.
But this year there was compromise.
Well,
again, some, but that's kind of the big thing that's out there. It's part of the presidential race as well, and there just doesn't seem to be the appetite among lawmakers to.
Well, the
to
Supreme
really push
Court just turned down the ban on bump stocks, which some found controversial. We still have a bump stock ban here in Rhode Island. The Attorney General went out of his way to say that doesn't change our state law.
Well, because again, correct me if I'm wrong, but what the Supreme Court's take was that the president, and it was President Trump at the time, his administration, the ATF, didn't have the authority to do it the way they did. And I think it was Justice Alito said it's in Congress's hands, so if they wanted to pass a law, they potentially could.
All right, Tammy, I've seen several stories you've been doing on the solar industry.
Oh, yes.
Which is getting bigger and bigger. You know, you drive down the highway, you see these solar farms.
Yep.
But that's you're more specifically talking about these people who want to put solar on top of your house.
Right, the door-to-door solicitors that come to your house, they make you all these promises, and then a lot of people get the solar panels and they're saying, wait a minute, you promised me this amount of money back and I didn't get that. So there's been the biggest issues with the tax credits from speaking to Nerona and the Department of Business regulations that these people are promised you'll be getting this big chunk of money back in federal tax credits up to 30%. And then you find out later, these people can't be giving tax advice. They don't know their income. And it turns out they're not really paying federal taxes. So therefore, they're not getting any break. They're not getting any money back. They're paying that full cost for the solar panels. And they have no idea what just happened and why they're not getting their money. So they complain to the state, and the state says, we don't really have any regulations in place, but that finally changed this year. They passed a new law, so the solar solicitors are going to be regulated by the state. DBR will keep an eye on them. They'll have a full list of them. They have to identify themselves at the door. And they also have new regulations on what has to be inside of the contract. So for example, if there's a warranty on your roof, if they penetrate holes in your roof and then that leads to a massive leak, which we've seen happen.
I imagine it does.
That has to be in the contract, that's covered under warranty, or it's not covered under warranty, along with the tax credits and exactly how much money these people are going to get back, where their estimates came from.
And Tammy and I were talking because a bunch of Ask Alison questions came in about this too, about meters. Are they matching up correctly with solar panels? I had just this week somebody say they got a $6,000 bill. They do not owe anything. Rhode Island Energy owned up to it and said they messed up. That should be a zero balance. Wrong meter. So all of this is kind of working itself out, though. Credit to Rhode Island Energy for sending a technician out there, though, and fixing it.
Right.
So,
who has solar here? Anybody?
I've been looking into it, but haven't done it. I also
I
have a
keep
small
track of
roof.
Tammy's stories.
I was going to say, I already know my roof's too old, and I don't need to get into that.
And I don't think you can do it with slate, but I am looking into it for commercial properties. I don't know. You have to really measure the upfront cost with what you're going to save month to month. It's a process to really understand.
Yeah, you have to do your own research. You can't just take the salesperson.
And then you can buy energy from different sources. It's a whole thing.
All right. Stay with us. More topics when we come back with our Reporter Roundtable. Welcome back. If you saw last week's 10 News conference, you saw me ask Attorney General Peter Nerona if he's being fair to Governor McKee. That ILO investigation into the governor started under the Attorney General and then was given to the FBI. Still no answer. Still no decision on that. Is that fair to the governor? I put it to the Attorney General, yes or no? The point is, you had him under investigation with this ILO thing. He had to run a re-election on that. And now so much time has gone by. At what point do you say, give me the answer? Yes or no, FBI?
The public will have an answer soon.
Could you tip your hand a little bit for me?
I know you want me to, Gene, but no, I'm not going to do that now.
But is this going to drag on, or there'll be a resolution?
No, there'll be a resolution.
Do you think it's been fair to him?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I think we have a job to do, and of course I think we're fair when we do our jobs.
Well, on the radio, I asked the governor if he thinks he's being treated fairly, or was this political on the part of the Attorney General. Here's what he told me.
Yes, so I mean, obviously there's a political agenda. The Attorney General has said that he didn't vote for me in the primary in 2022. He also has said that he's doing what he can to make sure that they don't get a bad outcome in the 2026 election, which meant when he was pushed on, it meant that that Governor McKee doesn't get reelected.
There's no love lost between those two guys. We know that.
It's getting worse.
Yeah.
Especially on social media. The Attorney General, throughout the past, recent months, has taken multiple opportunities to throw shade at the governor. But it's been two years since this has been going on. And again, this was a school consulting contract that the McKee administration handed out to a company with some connections to people he knows. And one of the things, and again, the Attorney General Nerona didn't want to tip his hand as to what would happen. He's had this pattern, in other things he's looked at the McKee administration of saying, okay, we didn't find any criminal action, but you shouldn't have done that. You should have known better. With
Right.
Bud Craddock at the DMV, with Tony Silva, who was the governor's chief of staff early on. And that's kind of, he'll take him to task when he isn't going to bring criminal charges. So I'm interested to see if that's what's going to happen. If that's going to happen again, if he'll say, oh, okay, we don't think anything was deliberately done wrong, but you should have known better.
Well, yeah,
it doesn't look good.
He spanks them in a letter.
Yeah.
No charges, but he spanks them in a letter.
Slap on the wrist.
But again, the feds are involved here too, so that kind of changes the dynamic, and I don't know what kind of role the two of them have together.
Yeah. Well, what also changes this is that Nerone is looking at higher office, maybe running for governor himself or lieutenant governor, teaming up with Helena Folks. That changes the dynamic of
What
this.
I don't understand in the story, maybe you do, is who's controlling the timeline of when the answer is made. Is it the Attorney General?
Well,
is it up to him? Or is it up to the FBI at this
It's up to
point?
the FBI. Now, the U.S. Attorney would get involved if there's anything to be referred. But you have to think that if they wanted to move along, they could. They held it
That's
over
my
McKee's
point,
head
right?
during the election. All right, listen, politics is a rough game. I guess you'd ask Josh Miller that, the state senator from Cranston, who says he's not running anymore.
Well, he was accused of keying a car with an anti-Joe Biden. This was a while ago, right? He pled to that, but he didn't resign. So I think we talked about it on a roundtable when it happened. We're like, oh, a lot of these lawmakers seem to be able to weather the storm. So he did, but he's not running again. Amongst this is, this week after the session ended has been kind of a time where lawmakers are saying, I am running again or I'm not. Because again, the election's right around the corner, but
He's been there a long time, too.
Yeah.
He has a bunch of businesses. Maybe he's just done.
No, it's a lousy way to go out, though, because
It
that
is.
story is still fresh. It was only
It's
last year.
not going to go away either.
No,
You know
it's
how
not.
Rhode Island is.
Senator Lombardi says he's not running.
Yeah.
And Senate President Ruggiero says he is running.
Yeah?
He wants to come back for another bite at the
had
apple.
some health issues, right? And I
Yep.
think it was a few months ago that there was some speculation as to whether some of the other senators were angling for the position if he wasn't going to come back. But he says he is.
But most interesting, most entertaining, perhaps, is the Cranston mayoral race with the two Republicans battling it out, including
Is it fair
the
to say
incumbent
it's nasty?
Ken
I don't
Hopkins.
think I've seen a city race get so intense in my life. You would think that they're going for governor, but this is happening in the city of Cranston.
And among people who used to be friends.
Yeah.
And liked each other, right? You've got the incumbent mayor, Ken Hopkins, a Republican, who succeeded Alan Fung, another Republican, and they were basically on this same part and parcel, and then things kind of went south. I think when Hopkins said there was some budget problems left in his lap, and it's gotten pretty feisty with some personal accusations.
Hopkins came in, and there was some leftover problems, and he was very diplomatic in not blaming Alan Fung. And then he says Alan Fung came to him and was looking for work as a lawyer, and he said, I can't give you any favoritism. And he says that's when everything fell apart.
He said that on the show.
There's another side of the story. Barbara Ann Fenton Fung is called Ken Hopkins delusional with these things. She kind of started the fire.
Yeah, and I think it's been a lot of non-policy driven back and forth. I'll put it that way. So, not highbrow policy stuff to start. I think it'll be interesting to see if the voters of Cranston want to see if Barbara Ann Fenton Fung can make a policy case as to why she thinks she's better than Ken Hopkins. Has he done a bad job, or does she just think, she came out and said the city's lost its mojo? But is that enough to convince people he's done a bad job? Do we go back to the Alan Fung and the way he ran the city? Is it much different?
Yeah. She fired the first shot right here on 10 News Conference. He returned fire just as strong. Well, listen, we work in Cranston. So we all hope the city just keeps moving along.
But none of us vote here, so we don't have to vote. I don't think.
Well,
thanks for being here.
I live in Cranston, so.
You live in Cranston?
Yeah.
All right, very good.
Sorry about that.
Well, we all work in Cranston. That's it for us for now. Thanks for joining us. That's 10 News Conference. Have a great weekend. We'll see you again next week.